We're on. Boom. So, cha-ching.
I gotta open my lid thing.
No. All good.
First blooper of the day. That's all good.
One more for the reel. Why not? Why not? Same here too. I'm actually just, in fact, just getting used to my new pair of glasses. I had to get a new pair because my short-sightedness has gone up. But
really?
now I'm seeing, yeah, man. But this is great. Everything's clearer now, which is not that much clearer. It's funny how that makes.
But saying clarity,
right?
yeah.
Clarity, right? Clarity. Clarity is important, man. Speaking of clarity, I think it's no coincidence. This is a theme, I think, for this year, 2020, right? 2020 vision and all that.
Interesting.
So something that's been at the back of my mind has been how this year seems to be an opportunity to see things more clearly. Like there seems to be a lot of things that are coming through to the fore. I wonder if you've had maybe similar thoughts yourself.
Yeah, I'll say it quite bluntly. Like 2020, you see more clarity. You get more clarity with the shit that's coming through, all the underground stuff, all the stuff that we've been avoiding.
It's been swept under, yeah.
It's all that crap. Especially as exacerbated by COVID-19. I think that's a very good one. By the way, I mean that to me is something that it's an elephant on the wall with regards. Oh no, elephant on the wall. Picture that.
It probably would crash through the wall if it's on the wall.
Yeah, it's like spider elephant or something. That's but no, it's the big elephant in the room that we never seem to address, because that's the thing that can really take out civilization. And then it started to hit us, and it's still hitting us right now, globally. And it's brought up a lot more of the deep stuff, things that it makes you more in fear mode, and because of the fear mode, it brings up a lot of the unresolved issues that we have been experiencing in society, especially around Black Lives Matters and stuff like that. I mean, it always ebbs and flows, but right now it's like boom, to an extent, and other things happen too. So you're right, bro. Yeah. Clarity.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Use this opportunity as a way to examine more carefully what are the things that we have been avoiding.
Absolutely. Yeah. Things that we've been avoiding, and things that perhaps are uncomfortable. Things that perhaps create tension or point to the more negative aspects of humanity. So, for example, as you pointed out, I think Black Lives Matter has certainly perhaps highlighted the fact that there is some disparity, perhaps between blacks and non-blacks in America, the UK, and other parts of the world, say in terms of maybe economic inequalities, the way law enforcement deals with civilians and that type of thing. And at the start of COVID, there was also perhaps a bit of a revelation around some simmering kind of anti-Asian racism, perhaps, that bubbled.
Oh yeah.
That as well, certainly. And also, it seems like in recent times too, the Me Too movement has been picking up again a little bit in terms of some of the comeuppance, perhaps, for a lot of these celebrities and whatnot who are having to face up to past transgressions. As you might know, there's the whole Johnny Depp case that's going on at the moment in the courts, and there's been other celebrities that have been called out for past misdeeds. So yeah, a lot's coming through, a lot to process.
As well. It's a very current one. I mean, his partner, I think, is being investigated.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And I saw something about how Bill Clinton is being roped into this as well. So the plot thickens, basically.
Yes. And then with Ghislaine Maxwell's arrest as well, there's all the Epstein stuff coming through again.
Yeah.
All that. Which is interesting, because as you know, we recently had a conversation actually around these types of topics. And in a way, we're still processing a lot that's come through. And you're referring to last Tuesday when we had the
the first co-gendered circle. Oh, kind of co-gendered, but we had women as guests in our men's group. In our men's
wasn't
circle.
that interesting?
Yeah, it's the first time we ever had that, and it was definitely a risky one to thread because I already know as a facilitator that's a very charged topic, and not only the issue is really charged, but the people that we have had guests in the group had all three of them had similar stories around a very, very sensitive issue for both men and women around sexual abuse, rape, which is a very, very serious thing, but not talked a lot about in society. So I think the last group meeting actually gave an opportunity for some awareness around that. And so in organizing that, I was just like, yeah, maybe slightly anxious too, because I've never really approached something like that, and every situation is different too. And I needed to make sure that I didn't bring up stuff that we couldn't handle, or will leave unresolved to an extent. As a facilitator, you kind of need to really tie it up. So you had to be threaded really, with sensitivity. To the needs of the people who were there, for the needs of the women who were telling their story. That sort of stuff, we don't take it lightly.
Oh, absolutely. And I think obviously kudos to them for being there and opening up. I only imagine it takes a lot of courage. I mean, you're talking about three women who are opening up to a bunch of strangers. I mean, I think about how, for example, us as men in this men's group, we are relatively open with each other about sensitive topics, but we already know each other relatively well, right? And so there is in a certain level ease there. But for them to come in and to talk to basically a bunch of strangers, I think it's a testament to their tenacity and the resolve as well. So
I in organizing for the evening, I did ask them, like, what is it that you would like from the end of the meeting, and all. So we had a bunch of different things, but I think in the end they came to the realization during the meeting itself that it's about telling the story so that we can be aware, so that we can learn from it. And it's not so much about telling the story as, like, I think more importantly, they didn't do it for entertainment, for our entertainment at all. I mean, it wasn't entertaining, it's pretty hard to hear a lot of these things, but they wanted the awareness to come out so that that we can play a part in preventing another woman from being put in the same situation. I think that's mainly they're doing it for women. And I really think that's a really great thing that they're making a stand for other women. Yeah, I think that's the best intention I feel that they have. And I mean, it's the intention, which is leading to the best possible outcome. That's what I meant.
Oh, absolutely. I do feel like this is a message that certainly needs to get out there. And I think certainly having this opportunity to have this dialogue is really important, because these are difficult issues that we need to confront. And I feel like this is what perhaps 2020 vision and clarity is about, that in order to see things clearly, you do have to confront difficult topics, face the music, so to speak. And it's it was great for us, I think, as men, to be able to be confronted with these harsh realities, which are the realities for a lot of women.
I'd like to carry on the conversation to explain a bit of the context around the men's work that we do.
Yes, we do.
And explain the context as to why it was necessary to bring in women after nearly 2 years of us operating as a men's group, as a men's circle. So when I did men's group as a way to to better myself, to be around people, to be able to tell me what I'm not seeing, aka my blind spots, and then to be in a safe environment so I can be accountable for that. So much help from that point of view, but also I was very interested in how I was going to resolve in myself my own relationship with my inner feminine, and also how I'm going to relate with especially women, because there's a lot of confusion around our roles in society and all, and you know, when it comes to dating and stuff like that, it's a whole different ocean of fish. Yeah. So I needed to find out the dynamic that was going on within myself and outside. And I found that, you know, the men's work was probably the best because it can really examine the masculine aspects of our expression through with other men, and we also can relate to a lot of the same issues that we face together as a group. Of course, it's not an entirely homogeneous group. We are diverse. Men are all diverse. We're all unique individuals, but there are certain core similarities in the problems that we face, that we share. And so sometimes getting together with a form of solidarity around that, we will start to understand, oh, okay, you know, we got you, we got your back, kind of stuff. So through that is bettering ourselves as men. That's essentially what we're doing. We are growing together. We're growing together, and we're questioning stuff together. We're using critical thinking. We're holding ourselves accountable and all that stuff, in our actions. But to better ourselves for what? Right? That's the big question. It's not good enough to be better for the sake of getting better for ourselves. Yes, for ourselves too. I mean, it starts from within. Change starts from within. But what is our role in society? We want to affect the larger society, and men are not, you know, we don't make up the entire global population. You know, we share our lives with women too. We share our lives with non-gendered people as well, and we also share with children. Maybe they haven't reached this level of adulthood, so, you know, can keep them in their own category. You know, they're precious to us. So how do us men relate to this world out there, to women, to elderly, to the non-gendered people, and then to the children too, because we're all part of the same humanity. Right. So in the end, I've always been interested in the dynamics between men and women, particularly from the masculine feminine perspective. And I know I want to separate that masculine and feminine exists in every single individual, but as a whole, in the general terms, how does that get expressed in society? And I think it's good to look at men and women to see the distinction, generally speaking. Of course, not everyone fits the mold. So, and then to bring up another issue is another issue of, like, we see a lot of broken marriages. I mean, I've been divorced before. I've been married and then divorced. You knew my ex. We go back a long way. And so how then do we resolve our differences, especially when men and women think so differently? You know, we can be at war. We can be like complete opposites in a sense, and talk different languages and then completely miss each other's point. John Gray, Dr. John Gray, he wrote the book Men Are From Mars, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, just to highlight that we kind of come from different planets, really. So then if you want a functional society, then how do we meet and communicate? We have to understand each other's story. So that's why the co-gender circle on Tuesday was very much about that. Let's start the ball rolling, let's start the conversation going to help resolve the differences between men and women, how we operate. By first, and it is my own view that men should take the initiative to start the ball rolling, to go, okay, women, tell us a story, so that we can properly process what you're saying, and we can, as best as we can, understand what you had to go through and what the dynamics were that led to that, to those things, so that we can prevent it from happening again. So that's in brief the context around why we had the co-gendered circle. First time in nearly 2 years.
Oh, certainly. This is an absolute milestone, if you like, in terms of the progression of the group, I think, because, you know, to reach a stage where the group is, you know, comfortable to have, you know, non-members of the group, if you like, and certainly from the other gender, you know, be present, I think speaks to the mantle of the group as a whole. So I think that's certainly a positive development. And I think certainly as men, we can do more and do better at listening. And certainly I think that's what we did that evening. We gave them the space. I think it was set out quite clearly at the start of the meeting that we're going to hold the space for them and to let them speak their hearts and their minds. Right? And I think it was important for them to get it out there. So speaking of which, I wonder if you had the opportunity perhaps to speak to the three guests after this event and how they felt about sharing their experiences.
Yeah, so today, Saturday, the meeting was on Tuesday, so just a few days. I think it was about like 2 days after where, you know, I do what I can to follow up, and you know, I give them a call, send messages, depending on their mode of communication. Generally, I think the follow-up process was very important because there's raw stuff that came up. You know, you don't want to just leave it there and like, oh yeah, you know, after open heart surgery, you're just like, oh, don't bother about the stitches, just like, you should be right.
Okay.
No, it doesn't work that way. So I checked in and we won't call them by names for privacy.
Absolutely.
So woman A, woman B, woman C, as we agreed. Woman A being probably a little bit more progressed in her path of her journey and healing, was okay, you know. She thought that she learned some perspectives from the other women who probably shared a more, not so narrated what happened, but more like how they felt about it. And that became a lot more raw because of that, and it's the feeling, you know, that's really important. So she thought that was really cool. She liked the opportunity, and she also felt very strongly that the story should get out. Person B and or women B and C connected a little bit more. So that was nice, and then and I think woman C was probably the newest in the circle kind of format, so had a lot more to process. And I've heard her feedback, and you've been messaging, and she's been giving some really, really helpful feedback as to how you know, how to improve it, or other things to consider when not if, but when the next co-gendered circle happens again. So quite a bit of process, yes, but quite a mix reaction. Generally, it went well. There were a few unresolved things associated with that from the evening, but I'm also saying, yeah, you know what? It's a very, very complex issue. You know, that's why the conversation has to start, and then it will continue when the work gets done. Yeah. So with Women C, she seems motivated to do her own women's events. That's and that's like, oh my, that's wonderful. That's music to my ears, because then I know that the women are doing their work and the work is spreading. And I have to credit Keeper and Sage and the group, that, you know, we have managed to inspire more of this work to happen. And I think that's a really, really positive thing.
Yeah,
so that's the women. The guys are another.
I can imagine. So I would assume you've had the opportunity to perhaps do a debrief with some of the men who were present that evening.
Not really. I mean, in a way, we can debrief.
Let's do it.
Yeah. I have to admit that, you know, you saw the chat group that we have for the circle, quite lively. There was a diversity of opinion around that. More questions, certainly, and that's good, because we want the questions. And I deliberately said, you know, in my response, I say, okay, well, let's leave the discussion to when we are speaking in person. And we can debrief next Tuesday. The reason is that I want to avoid online discussions, because things have become very mechanical, very intellectual. Everything's words. There's no emotions, which is a core part of the communication. Yeah, and there's a lot of room for misinterpretation and arguments, because this is a very heated topic. Yeah. So it's definitely much more healthy to be in person to discuss these things. And I certainly don't want to like spend my time. I mean, I've got my day job, so I don't want to be like typing away. I really had a hard time like trying to like push out that paragraph that I did in less than 2 minutes. You know, you have to think it through, right? So like I was in the car just going, oh, guys.
I think this is with any kind of subject or topic that, you know, elicits perhaps strong emotions one way or the other. And I think it's quite easy to get really sucked into a whole thread of discussions around this type of stuff. And it can really take up a lot of your time and energy. So yeah, I think with a pinch of salt for sure. But I certainly agree that a face-to-face, or in our case, a screen-to-screen type interaction is useful, certainly in real time, because there are I mean, the issues kind of wrapped up in here are really quite deep, and it requires a bit of a kind of a live discussion around that, which is why this is what we're doing here is really useful. So on that note, I do have a question for you. What do you think is one main takeaway for you from that evening? Well, what is the one thing that really stood out to you? Either from, it could be anything, it could be the man's reactions to it, or the woman's reactions, or whatever it might be.
My main takeaway is how much we need to address this elephant in the room. Because with the discussions that ensued from the women's perspective and from the men's perspective, oh my word, a lot of people have a lot to say. And we need to start talking about this. And in a forum where it's, you know, not going to escalate and explode into like a fist fight. Yeah. Because it's a very emotionally driven topic. You know? Women have been hurt by men. Men have been hurt by women. And when you get this dynamic together, it's a drama series. Yeah. I wonder, you know, I want to put it back to you, you know, like what were your reflections from that, because you were present for the entire meeting?
Yeah, I'd say the one probably main takeaway for me, perhaps, I mean, there were many, but the one that really stood out to me, I think, was, and I think this is where maybe it got a little bit heated, was around language use. So, for example, the woman pointed out that using the C word is particularly offensive, and they gave their reasons around it. And I could sense there was a bit of resistance from the men, from some of the men perhaps, around the fact that, oh, it's, I think some refer to the fact that in New Zealand, certainly, to call someone, a good cunt, a GC, and sometimes as it's referred to in short, euphemistically as well, is meant to be kind of a term of endearment, but what the women pointed out was, the way the term's used, even though it's used in that context, it's still a word that refers to female genitalia, and we don't necessarily use male genitalia perhaps in such derogatory references, or with such wild abandon perhaps. And look, I mean, I have to put my hand up and say I'm guilty of using the C word myself in everyday language. It's almost like I guess part of the vernacular perhaps. So one takeaway for me personally was around the fact that I too need to be a bit more self-aware perhaps of the language I use, because words do have a certain energy associated with them, and there are connotations around that, and they carry baggage, and certainly with words that perhaps are on the more vulgar end of the spectrum, they certainly attract certain emotions. So that's a reflection, I think, certainly for me.
Yeah, it was a very interesting topic brought up, eh? And certainly I didn't really myself think about it from that perspective. And I think that's why we need a woman's perspective to come in and like, okay, actually, yeah, there is a point. There's a point. Why do we talk about the vagina and use the slang in such a derogative term? And it's probably, see, we go C word, but we don't never go the D word, as in dick, or the other C word, cock, like, or the A word, asshole.
Yeah.
But then we go to the C word, like the. I think it's very hard to almost like give explanations to that, and actually the whole context of how it got brought up like that is just like, makes you think, like, yeah, why is there that the disparity of how we treat that particular word? Yeah, do we associate it with something like meek and almost weaker, like they can dominate over? So is that the domineering dynamic that goes on with that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I would say that perhaps just like there is casual racism, I do feel like there is casual sexism too. So the women did point out that even when we use the P word, pussy, often it's used as a put down, like, and especially when men use the word to refer to other men, don't be such a pussy. It's a put down to say that, oh, you're weak, right? So the word pussy is associated with weakness.
Yeah,
and weakness associated with femininity, and so I think this is what the women are getting at. That when we refer to female genitalia, it's always in a bit of a put down manner. It's to it kind of reinforces this kind of top down perspective between the genders, and I think it's certainly unhealthy.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. The put downness, and that's probably one of the foundational problems that we go on in society, and why terms like patriarchy, especially patriarchy, gets singled out as the perpetrator for a lot of societal problems, especially from the feminist point of view, feminist discourse. And my explanation, not explanation, don't want to mansplain this. my perspective on this is that, we got to this point because we start to value what the patriarchy has done for society, and we can see it, it's things that are more visual. Whereas we don't really necessarily see the feminine in action, and therefore we don't value the feminine in that same regard. In a way, and therefore that there's an inequality, a perceived inequality that's going on. I mean, I tend to argue that the feminine is as present as the masculine in the world we live in, just that one is more visible and one is less visible. But one of the things that we do value is strength and domination, and we don't value the. I like to use the word yielding. Yielding is seen as weak, but maybe I bring in my Taoist hat, my Tai Chi Taoist hat, to say that there's this saying, the soft and supple will always overcome the hard and rigid. This out of the Tao Te Ching. So meaning to say that yielding is more powerful than so-called overt strength. And I think by that it's trying to highlight that, how come in the West we are valuing hardness and strength and that all those masculine qualities over the feminine qualities. And that's the inequality that's going on. I think energetic inequality that's going on. We are not valuing the traits of the feminine enough. We are masculinizing women. That's what we're doing. And also women are masculinizing themselves to fit into the world that we are supposed to operate in.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there are many ways to show strength without having to show aggression. And I think this is where perhaps as men we can do better at this. I think for a lot of men there is this impression that to show that you're masculine and strong, you need to be dominant, domineering, and aggressive, and to kind of exert how assertive you can be. Right? Whereas there could be strength in, say, silence too, or holding the space, or remaining calm. Right? So perhaps what we need to do is to kind of have a rethink about the ways we kind of express ourselves, and perhaps this is a conversation, an ongoing conversation that men need to have around what it means to be masculine. Perhaps.
Yeah, and at a different time we can bring up the topic of alpha, sigma, beta, those dynamics within
absolutely
people.
Oh, that's a deep dive indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. But certainly the purpose of having women bring in their perspectives into the group was to challenge men about their normal way of thinking, about how they, how we operate as a group as well, and especially around the sexual abuse and rape. Where do we find our place in that? It is a very difficult thing because it makes you think like, God, have I unconsciously let myself be a perpetrator of that? Because we are taught a lot of bad things in society. We talked about like scoring. Like you go on a date and then you check back in with all your guy friends and just go, then they'll be asking you, did you score? Did you score? Like, score what? Meaning say, did you get laid?
Yeah, there was that showmanship aspect, I think. That men do engage in. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there's almost this pressure to get into her pants, and then we got to ask ourselves why. Like, who is creating this? Is it a biological thing? This one question. Is it a societal pressure thing? Is it what guys have been misled to allow ourselves to think? Then we gotta go, critically think, like, well, is that actually very helpful? Is it natural? Is it?
Yeah. Now, this actually brings to mind, and you might remember this took place, I believe it was last year. There was this Gilette ad that came out that really divided people, right? There were those who praised this ad as being, quite a milestone, in fact, in terms of addressing a really difficult topic. But then there were the naysayers, you could say, who kind of dismissed this as just kind of over the top wokeness, and kind of derided this as kind of pandering to the social justice warrior activist types and all that. So it turned into a very heated debate, which I felt was a little bit unfortunate, because it seemed to obscure the fact that actually like it or not, Gillette, and for better or worse, whether they were doing this for marketing purposes or whatever, at least they were shedding light on a very difficult topic that has been swept under the rug for a long time. And I feel like that's certainly a topic that's not going to go away. So I still think props to Gillette for putting the ad up.
I had no problems with the ad myself. You know, I feel that it's true. We men have to hold ourselves in to a better standard, basically. So it talked about growth. I think, but I also understand where the anger came from. And that probably leads to my next point. Well, generally how some of the guys that I know in the group are feeling, although they're keeping it, pretty, they're being equanimous about that, basically. So
it's troubling them, isn't it?
Something's
troubling them. But something
troubling them. And I like that, because that's the whole point of conversation like that, is to bring out, what's actually troubling you and what are you actually feeling around that. So I've got my own perspective on that, and it's going to be reflected in my response to the Gillette ad too. I didn't have a problem with that. That was good. But when I look at the comments, when I was reading all those comments that ensued after the ad, I saw an overriding theme actually around some frustration as to like, what now? What else do I have to do? Like, I've got to do this. I don't want to do that. Like. It's basically, getting a vibe of, I don't want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
There's a certain element of virtue signaling in the ad, which I completely acknowledge. But maybe I'm quite okay with virtue. Like I want to hold myself to higher virtue as well. It's in my name, my Chinese name actually. So maybe I'm more tolerant to that, and I would like to be pushed in that area. So that's okay for me. A lot of other guys, they come from a different perspective. I think when you're told repeatedly again and again and again and again, one, how many things you're doing wrong, and two, how many things you're not doing enough of, then you just be like, why is this freaking world so demanding that I cannot just get on with my life, do what I have to do, and I know I'm good, and I'm doing what I can to support everything. I'm trying to hold up the whole society. No, not the whole society, but my family, my everything. Everyone's depending on me. My employees are depending on me. I'm doing so much for the world, and now I still have to be doing something else. I gotta call other men out. And it's not my problem. I don't want to do that. Why do you make it my problem to come and save you?
Yeah, it just seems like more work, right?
More work.
More work, yeah. There's already so much to deal with right now. Yeah. I do feel like that's criticism or concern is to an extent legitimate. I mean, I wondered if this might be quite a masculine thing in terms of wanting, not liking being told what to do. So for instance, if you look at, say, a lot of the, say, anti-mask protests that are going on, say, in America and in the UK, not so much in New Zealand, I don't think. I think you guys have generally handled COVID pretty well, but certainly where I am in the UK and the US and other parts of the world, it seems to be an overwhelmingly men who are opposed to the instruction to wear a mask, because I think some men don't like being told to put something on. Maybe it's the image of being muzzled, perhaps. So in America, some see this as perhaps an impingement on their civil liberties. Being told what to do, having to change their behaviors, and some men don't like it, perhaps, because some men are just quite locked in their way of doing things. But perhaps to tie this in with the conversation around, say, the way the genders interact, you could say maybe some men just don't want to modify their behaviors. They just see that as a bit of a reach, if you like. And I wonder too if maybe some of the frustration is around, say, knowing where the parameters as well. Because I think I read also in some of the comments a certain frustration around, okay, we acknowledge that maybe we could do better with some of our behaviors, but where is the line really? Right? And so is this going to affect the way we flirt from now on, that type of thing? So there's, I guess there is also that hang up about what does this mean from now on? How am I going to pick up a chick if I don't, you know, put on these displays of interest or whatever? Is that going to be seen as you know, sexist or a form of harassment as opposed to just, you know, innocent flirting? So where's the line? And I think, yeah, it's not clear perhaps for some.
Yeah, you're correct. I want to go back to an earlier point that you made, and then, you know, you made a lot of points.
Plenty of points, yeah.
The earlier point that you made about, you know, the frustration of men, yeah, being called to do more stuff. I'll just add on to that. I think majority of men, there's obviously some that don't fit within the category. We are doing our best. And we don't want to be given the message again that we're not doing enough. I think I'll just summarize it as that. And there's kind of the and addressing the doing our best is actually kind of addressing the other things that you're saying, you know, to what extent how far do we go? And that's part of the problem. We're doing our best to actually find out what the boundaries are. We don't know. Like, it's very hard to figure out. And it highlights another problem that we face as men. That just shows how much pressure is on us to figure all these things out. And I'm not trying to be hyper traditional about, you know, like I know in 2020 we is equal society and women also have a stake in responsibility and all that stuff. But ultimately, I think it shows that men have a different type of responsibility or pressure around a certain type of responsibility and then we were told we got to have the responsibility to take control of situations and, you know, and I didn't mention women say that they generally are attracted to men who take control. But I did clarify it's not take control of women, it's to take control of themselves. So you got a responsibility over yourself, you got a responsibility over your environment, and then you got to, like in dating, for example, you got to, it's kind of, you have to be the proactive one to go and lead the conversation. You got to approach to an extent. You got to open yourself up, and you got to be ready for rejection. Then maybe you have the responsibility of being gentlemanly, and then you have to open the doors for women, and some women don't like that, so you got this mixed signal. But it's your responsibility to find out what works. It's like so many things you got to think about, and so many things that you have to consider. That it's a pile up of work. If this pile up of work is like super high, then being right at the bottom of it, you start to feel that you start to realize that there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure associated with being a man.
Absolutely.
Being a man, then being a leader of men, being a leader of society, more and more pressure is stacked on top. And the pressure is sometimes not very clear. It's a dilemma they have to discern and work out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you are speaking to there actually raises two other further points on here. One being that, as you have alluded to, the fact that we as men have already taken on a lot of responsibilities, and so to have one more on our shoulders is a tough one. So I'm thinking now of actually it was a debate I watched. I think it might have been a TED talk perhaps, but it was around, for example, the inequalities around, say, gender pay. So generally men are paid more than women. And so there is an argument that this is some kind of structural sexism, perhaps. But then there's also a counter argument to that, that actually perhaps men also tend to take on more dangerous roles. Also, more physical roles. An example is given, for example, that to work out in the oil rigs, it's overwhelmingly men who choose to do that type of role, or to do other dangerous roles, like to work in, say, a coal mine or whatever. This is tough physical labor and it involves a lot of responsibilities. So men tend to find themselves, for whatever reason, in roles that tend to be quite onerous. And it's not to say that women don't have responsibilities, obviously, but it's to say that there are certain roles, certainly, that men assume, which require them to put on a lot on their shoulders, perhaps. And just one more thing, perhaps, it might just be the straw that breaks the camel's back to some, perhaps. And then the second thing also speaks to the fact that maybe there is some mixed messaging. So, for example, around leadership, lately you hear, say, women saying that there should be more consideration of women in leadership roles, say in CEOs, perhaps in companies, or for political roles or whatever it might be, right? But on the other hand, there's also an expectation that men take the lead in certain aspects. For example, usually it's expected that a man would propose as opposed to a woman proposing. We're talking specifically about heterosexual relationships, right? The expectation is that the man does the proactive thing and asks the woman for her hand, or perhaps say when say a couple's dancing, it's usually the man that takes the lead, and then the woman follows or whatever. And so there doesn't seem to be necessarily a consistent expectation across the board. And so this can be tough for men as well. So certainly I think this dialogue between men and women can help to clear up some of the blurring around the edges, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. By no means when I'm about to give an example for what to reinforce what you're saying, by no means I'm trying to diminish the issues that women face. We talk about equality in society these days, and talk about equality as an ideal, and yes, it's something that we are trying to work towards. But to compare apples and oranges is I call it asymmetry. Well, I understand it's asymmetry, two different things, but but how we want to value an apple and an orange, we value it in the same way. That's the equality, the quality of the equality. But we cannot say that the characteristics and the traits or the roles have to be equal, like divided equally. You can't make an orange and apple, like that kind of thing. Asymmetry.
Oh, absolutely.
So maybe I go back into a little bit of conservative type of understanding around roles in society, and I can't remember what image it was, but it's an image of like it's like a hierarchical kind of like triangle where I think they talk about it's a religious one. You got God on the top, and then the angels, and human beings, right. And then the animals, and then the plants, and then that hierarchy.
Yes, that's right. There's like this hierarchy of life or being, right?
Yeah.
God, the angels, then there's whatever, there's the other angelic class or whatever, and then there's men, women, children, animals, plants. Like there is a top-down thing. Yes, I was brought up around that too. Yes.
So it kind of looks like a tier like that, but I'm trying to change the illustration of that, and I call this like, maybe a much better one would be like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
So but I kind of reverse it, because the one on the top will have the highest need, like highest need. So I think subconsciously, intellectually, and subconsciously, we can agree that somewhat this is the dynamic that's going on, at least on the top tier. Right on the top, it's obvious the needs of this group comes above any other group out there. That's children.
Mm.
Those annoying little. Nah.
They're the most vulnerable in society. You
They
could
are the
say,
most
right?
vulnerable. In
Certainly.
human evolution, we have regarded, that's how we are going to relate to our children. They are right at the top.
Yeah.
Always about their needs. And it's not necessarily mean to pander to them to make them spoiled, but we look out for them, we educate them, we pour in most of our resources into our kids. Let's just say that maybe in Asian society, the elders also fit up there in the area.
Sure.
But maybe not so much in Western society, although I hope it's changing. So that's another whole discussion around where the elderly people fit. But let's just say it's three, right? The children, the women, and then the men. I think it's quite easy to start to picture whose needs come in next. It's the women. Now the women, they cater to the children's needs, and that's the motherly instinct that they have. So they have a responsibility over the kids. Now, in terms of society, it's my view that men just tend to occupy the bottom rung. So by their effect, just through the hierarchy of needs and addressing needs and delivering to the needs, it's grossly unequal for men.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. I mean, if you think about it, for example, whenever there is a marine disaster, right, and there is a ship that's sinking, who get on the life raft first is always women and children. They always get the priority. They always get the priority. And if you see a man charging towards a lifeboat, probably some other dude would intervene and say, hey, man, let the women and children go first. There is this expectation that they are given priority in terms of being saved. So there's an inherent inequality there too. And I remember watching, there was a clip recently, I think might have been Bill Burr, one of my favorite comedians actually. He's very raw, and he talks about how you'll never hear a feminist rushing into a burning building to save someone. They always expect a fireman to be running in there type thing. So it's kind of a humorous way of saying that, yeah, sure, it's all fine and well to desire equality as an ideal, but in practice, men are often expected to put themselves in dangerous positions, in dangerous situations, to be the ones to take the risk. It's always expected that we're the ones to bear the brunt of danger, and certainly when a ship's sinking, they're the ones to be sacrificed. I think so that also needs to be taken into consideration, and we as men wear this on us. That society expects us to do these things too.
Absolutely. I painted that graph with men at the bottom as the foundation is because they're the ones supporting everyone on top. That's the visual picture that we're trying to get. So while men are the least important, or the needs of men is least important in society. So one, it's not talked about or it's shunned upon. There's nothing more disgusting in the world than when you find a needy man. And I've been shamed. I've been shamed for being, why are you so needy? Like, oh my God, that's the worst insult to me. Like, it was very bad. So men cannot be needy. They have to be independent. They have to hold out everyone else. So if I reverse the whole psychology around that, if your needs don't matter as much, that means the responsibility that you have to give to others is much higher than everyone else, right? So that's why in traditional sense, like the man gets the money, provides for the family, and some people might say that, oh yeah, he's getting all the glory and stuff, but he's sacrificing a lot. Warren Farrell talks about the glint in a man's eye, especially when he assumes the role of a father. he loses the glint in his eye because he knows that he cannot pursue his dreams anymore. Neither can he really spend time with his family, although he wants to. But his role has been solely squared upon earning a living so that his partner, wife, and children can have sustenance. And that's why he takes on this role, sacrificing himself to do what seems to be like even a high-paying CEO job, and he pretends to like it. But in effect, you know, he knows that he's giving up time with his family at home in a very subconscious level as well, because his expectations is then he will like take it on and say, oh, this is what I have to do. This is, you know, I've got to find pride in it. Maybe I'll get some accolades. Maybe I'll get a pay rise and all that stuff. But really what he is doing it for is for the sake of his family. And he may not actually enjoy it. He might want to be a musician instead, but he knows he cannot be a musician. He has to take on a corporate paying job, you know, which sucks the life out of him to pay those bills.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But there's more of an expectation of that than of women to do that. And I'm not trying to diminish the fact that there are single moms who have to do all of the above too. And that's what's screwed up about society. Just saying, in a very traditional family unit, that is the expectation. So as men, we all feel that. To a large extent, we all feel the pressure of like, oh, you know, we have to be an equal player. Not equal player, but we have to have a certain role of providing. We have a certain role of protecting whoever we care for, and we're actions based, so we do it. But you know, maybe unfortunately, we don't show up in presence. We don't show up in our words. And then we become, you know, some of us become entitled because we say, oh, we're doing our role, so we need everything else done for us. But I'm just trying to highlight that pressure in itself is something that's less discussed in society. And so, you know, in the context of the group, there's this unspoken vibe, like, I'm really doing what I can to support everything in my life. And I know that when I get into a relationship, and especially for those who are married and have family, I'm really doing what I can to make it work for the people that depend on me. And so, like, how am I now being told I'm not doing enough? And I'm supposed to care about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel that perhaps for some men there is certainly this pressure to kind of prove yourself, right? And so there is certainly when you're made to feel inadequate, perhaps then maybe the natural reaction is to try and overcompensate for that. And perhaps for some men, by overcompensating, it means asserting themselves in certain ways that may be, you know, perceived in a negative light, perhaps. So yeah, it is tough. And I wonder too if maybe there is some obfuscation or perhaps some loadedness around the term equal anyway, because equal in what sense, right? So I think about how, for example, if you look at the feminist movement, in fact, it's not single as movements. There have been various waves of the feminist movement over time. One of the earlier waves of the feminist movement was to argue that women are equal to men on account of being just like men. But later, the new incarnation was actually, no, women are equal to men in virtue of being women anyway. So the argument being, it's not about trying to match men in every single thing. So I think it's not controversial or not sexist to say that on average, say, men are deemed physically stronger than women, so for example. And that's why, say, in say sports, you never have a mixed singles tournament. You have mixed doubles, yes. So you have a man and woman on each team, but you never have a man playing against a woman. Or, you know, in combat sports, you never have a man fight a woman, because more often than not, the man will overpower the woman. And I don't think it's, you know, it's controversial to say that. So there are certainly some inherent inequalities anyway between the genders. And I think it's okay to recognize the fact that these things do exist. And as you mentioned earlier, these are asymmetries. But the asymmetries should not be indications that there is an unequalness in the status. I think certainly we can agree that men and women should be considered equally valuable, in terms of a human life and worth and all those things. But certainly there are inequalities in various realities, and we just have to accept that is the case. One thing I do want to bring up is that I think in general it's also uncontroversial perhaps to say that women generally are more mindful than men, and so maybe they expect men to be more mindful as well. And I'll give you an illustration. There was a recent study, I think it was in 2015, done where a group of men and women were asked whether they would rather sit in silence and to reflect on their own thoughts for 10 minutes, or to be given a mild electric shock. So either you get shocked, it's not going to harm you, but you're going to feel a bit of a buzz, whatever. Either that, or you can sit and be alone with your own thoughts for 10 minutes. Now, what's really interesting is that 25% of women chose to have the electric shock, so a quarter. But 67% of men chose to have the electric shock, 2/3. So we're talking 25% versus 67%. It's quite a notable contrast here. So, you know, it's frightening, because I mean, both of us are meditators, and we you know, we've done Vipassana retreats and all that. And so for us to sit in silence is something that we were able to do. And I guess maybe a third of men are able to do that. But I guess what the study shows is that if this is truly representative of men and women in general, this shows that women generally are more mindful than men, and perhaps they expect that of us. And there are times when perhaps we as men do fall short of mindfulness.
I have a lot to say about that. It could be even a whole other topic. Around the dynamics. Yeah, it's the dynamics between the masculine and the feminine. Now, I want to assert again that we have both. So we can certainly tune into our feminine if we need to. An earlier point, you know, I think you brought up previously, and I'll say again, is that we are not valuing the feminine enough, even within ourselves.
Yes.
And so what I'll say to that is that women have a larger propensity to express their feminine traits more, and men have a larger propensity to express our masculine traits. So it doesn't mean we can't tune into either. So, oh shit, we don't have an excuse now. but generally speaking, yeah, if we're left to our own devices and not really being mindful per se about, you know, how we conduct how we think, the feminine energy is more all-encompassing, more holistic. So a feminine energy is more likely to see beyond just a single point. You know, it's more overview. So you see a lot more going on. A classic example is women can multitask better than men. That's an illustration in action. But whereas men, the complete opposite. Rather than having an overview of things, we have the ability to focus really narrowly on something. Women too. But men have maybe more of an ability to sustain that focus for a very long time. And that's why we tend to, like, when we get into the zone, we are like, you know, we forget about everything else outside. We're just in the zone. We're so focused.
Yes, we overlook certain things, yes.
Yeah, and therefore we overlook certain things. And it happens with, but it makes us better like fighter jet pilots, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
And also, that being said, masculine traits express very well in certain jobs. Like if you're a soldier at war, you kind of need masculine traits more. Now, of course, you got to think overall, but maybe those who are trained to think overall, I mean, they're generals.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, generally, you'll find that there is an overwhelming number of men compared to women in say, the armed forces and so forth, right? So the military is overwhelmingly dominated by men.
But there's also another dynamic that goes on, and it's about the needs triangle that I talked about as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Whoever has most important needs, their lives are valued more than the ones below. So, in essence, actually, men's lives don't matter as much as women's, who don't matter as much as children's. So that is how the hierarchy goes, I believe. But that's the other dynamic. But I think what I mean to say is that, I mean, we're just good at hunting. This is because of masculine energy, the drive to push us forward. Whereas women are better at raising kids, for the reason that they are more aware about the surrounding dangers. They're more hyper aware about every single thing that's going on. So they're taking a lot of information on. Yeah. Absolutely. That's why it's normal that women cannot make up their minds, because they are considering a lot of things. Whereas men are like, it's a much more focused way of thinking. But women, and as a result, women they develop wisdom better than men, because they have a much bigger, wider scope of how they understand things.
Oh, sure. I guess that perhaps what you spoke to there is the fact that maybe decisiveness is considered a more masculine trait, whereas say something like maybe empathy perhaps might be considered more of a feminine trait, perhaps. A more of a willingness to consider the entire spectrum of needs and so forth, which is why men generally are considered to be a little more callous and calculated, perhaps. And this is also why say serial killers are overwhelmingly men as well. We tend to lack that empathy element a little bit, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, hence that's the importance of the work of Keeper and Sage in our circles. It really is about trying to hone it doesn't market well when I say it's about feminine connection within a men's group. But it's a way in the safety of men. How do we explore some parts of our feminine, including connection, empathy,
absolutely.
And do it in a manly way? There's absolutely nothing unmanly about it, but it's tapping to a different energy within ourselves.
Absolutely.
Because if it was all masculine, then we won't be in circle. We won't be meeting up. I mean, like a full-on 100% masculine thing is solo. It's a lone ranger. There's no need for friends or whatever. Like the fact they have connection, it is a feminine connection anyway. So we need to recognize that and see that's a lack in society that we have, is that lack of understanding that there's some feminine traits that we value, and we need to bring it out to the surface and say, yes, it's feminine, it's fine, we allow that and we value it, and this is just one aspect of it, and there's a whole lot of other things, especially empathy. Empathy is a very, very important feminine trait that even men should develop within themselves.
Oh, absolutely. And I do feel like there are certainly all these issues and others that came to the fore through this discussion session that we had just on Tuesday, actually. And I think what came through certainly is that there are aspects that we as men can certainly work on and improve on. And I wonder maybe if this might be a good opportunity to maybe put a quick pause perhaps in this conversation before we get into the depths of all that.
Yes, I think there's a lot more to be said, but I think for now it's definitely a nice way to wrap up. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, yes.
Very interesting. Got to keep
absolutely
the going.
Well, and I look forward to our men's group session again this upcoming Tuesday. I can imagine this being a very lively session because there'll be a lot of feedback going on and reflections.
Yeah.
Based on the previous session.
Yeah.